I'm a children's librarian in Port Orchard.
Hi everyone, I'm Tori. I'm a youth services librarian out at Kingston.
Hello, my name is Aaliyah. I am the youth services librarian for Silverdale.
Yes, and today we are going to talk about Florilegium, which is a really fancy old Latin word for a book of quotations that you thought were interesting, that you pulled from everything that you're reading or listening to or watching. My favorite thing about Florilegium is that originally they were done by monks, and they were important passages, things that they thought were really good about the Bible or whatever religious text they were reading. And then they adapted into something that people could just pull out whatever they found meaningful. So for instance, if something just sort of sparkles up at you from the page that you really notice a certain kind of phrase or whatever, then you would write that down, and then you make it into your own book, which is called a Florilegium. And those phrases and words and stuff take on a new meaning because they're next to other lines. So if you reread them, they sound different now, and they might mean something different and teach you something about yourself or what you think about something. So we're going to do a tiny Florilegium exercise today with our books, and we've all been reading things and watching things, some of us, and taking down lines that just sort of sparkled at us, that we really noticed. And we're going to talk about what we noticed about what we noticed. Sound good? All right. So I have been watching a ton of Supergirl and also The Flash. I've also been reading Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, and I've been reading The Tenant of Wildfell Hall, which is an Anne Bronte book. And I think I've been reading a couple of other things too, like the newspaper and stuff like that. And I've just been taking down lines from it. I've noticed something about the lines I've taken down. So a lot of the lines I took down have to do with this idea of like how to be calm. One of them is a quote from Supergirl that says, "There's great power in being the calm at the center of the storm." That was a line that I noticed while I was watching. And then there's another one where it says, "It sounds like the light in the darkness." And that's from a book called Lilani of the Distant Sea by Erin Entrada Kelly. And then this one I find really interesting. I was reading Their Eyes Were Watching God, which is an amazing book by Zora Neale Hurston. And it says, "The stillness was the sleep of swords," which I just thought was so interesting and exciting. So I'm going to read all of these lines again, but next to each other, and we're going to see if they sort of mean something different than they originally did when they were in their books or in their shows. So I'm going to switch up the order just to see if that brings out something different about them, right? "It sounds like light in the darkness, but the stillness was the sleep of swords. There is great power in being the calm at the center of the storm."
And it sounds a lot like there's darkness surrounding something that's light, and that's kind of maybe how you feel or what you're looking for. Is there's a lot of storm and stuff happening that's kind of shrouding your vision and stuff like that. And so finding that light or being that calming center, that kind of stood out to me from your 3 lines there.
Oh, I love that. I love that. And also, I think after I said, "It sounds like the light in the darkness, but the stillness was the sleep of swords," it also reminded me to be something like calm and chill in the middle of a really troubling, maybe scary thing.
So I've been reading a lot of different things. The one line that doesn't necessarily fit in with everything came from that book, and it was, we all boogers anyway. And I just thought it was funny. I know. But then it doesn't necessarily fit with my other lines. I don't, or maybe it does, who knows? So some other lines that sparkled at me, and I don't know why I chose them, but the concept of Florilegium is that things sparkle at you, and they create books called sparklets, and then that gets passed on to other people who then will go through these sparklet books, finding those one-liners that sparkle at them. And so one that stood out from It Rained Warm Bread, which was about the Holocaust, was that it said, "We forgave ourselves for not knowing." And then from the Tea Dragon book, I picked a line called, "Whatever I do from now on will be lovelier and richer because I understand what's important now." And then from this Hungry Hearts book, which is about food and love. And it says, because we can all use a little shaking up. Whatever I do from now on will be lovelier and richer because I understand what's important now. We forgave ourselves for not knowing because we can all use a little shaking up.
Ooh. We are all boogers. We could all use a little shaking up. We get crusty. We get stuck. We become kind of annoying, but we can forgive ourselves for not knowing. We can get a little shaken up and then have greater understanding when we kind of break our little shells and come out of the mold.
I like that. It also reminds me of like going from when you made a mistake to what you do when you know better. So it sounds like to me, the person who's now like a fictional person in my head, who's all three of these lines, sounds like they made a mistake and they're like, I'm going to do better in the future. And then the next step is they're like, yeah, because I know it's important and I know what I did. And then like the last one is, and if you count the boogers, is like, yeah, because we don't get better unless we get a little shaken up and we change the rules and like we figure out what's important. Aaliyah, do you want to go?
I do, because now I'm super stoked because I read out of A Sudden Light by Garth Stein, a sudden light in the darkness. And what I gathered, what sparkled to me was I've been doing a lot of reading with A New Earth by Eckhart Tolle, and it's a quote that says, "We do not see things the way they are, we see them as we are." If you feel you don't have enough, you hold on to things. But if you feel you have enough, you let go of things. Everything has life. Everything has a history. The trick is allowing yourself to hear it. We don't see things as the way they are, we see them as we are. And how do we reconcile the differences between what we see and what we know?
These are all really deep to
They
start.
are very
I feel like we're gonna have to. So part of Florilegium, like the word Florilegium, is a book of flowers. It's sparklets, but it's also flowers. Like you're wandering in a garden made of books, and you just like pick the flowers that mean the most to you, and you gather them in a bouquet. We're gonna be wading through a really deep garden. Okay, I had like a moment.
Go.
Okay, with my lines, they were all about stillness and stuff. And I was thinking maybe if you feel you have enough, then you're able to be like still so that you can hear all the stuff that you need to be hearing, which by the way kind of sucks on the flip side, because if you don't feel like you have enough, then maybe you like can't hear all these great secrets or things that will help you get better.
But also, like growth through adversity. Like how often do we make big strides in our own personal growth when things are just totally smooth and going our way? We generally continue on our normal path because things are working.
Because why change?
And then when you bump into that hard place, you have to find a way around it. And you usually have to grow, you have to change, you get shooken up.
I think my biggest takeaway from Aaliyah's, and then kind of just bringing it back to this whole Florilegium thing, is how we perceive if we have enough or not enough. It was all about, like, the word I wrote down was perception, and how, like, in my mind, am I perceiving these things and looking at these things like I don't perceive that they have history, but they do have history. And then going back to Florilegium is where our perception of what we're reading and what sparkles to us. If we all read the same book, something is going to be different for us individually, and it's going to sparkle at us differently, and that's our own perception of what we read.
Because we don't see things the way they are, we see them as we are.
Yes, there we go.
So that was a really short version of what you can do with Florilegia. If you're just sort of wandering through, like, if you think of books as a garden of things that you can learn, you're wandering through and you're picking things that mean something to you. And then when you compare them with each other or compare them with your friends, you learn all sorts of really cool things, and try to find a way to listen for a little bit and to learn from what has happened and to come out lovelier and maybe not crusty and maybe not as boogery and not stuck. So that is why we do Florilegium. Bye. See you next time.